Spring. The season of new beginnings. As snow melts and flowers bloom, most people welcome the change with open arms. The air smells fresher, the days grow longer, and the world feels alive again. But not everything that awakens with the spring thaw is meant to be found. Sometimes, the rising temperatures stir things best left buried, dark secrets, haunted memories, and entities that have waited in silence all winter long. Today, we're diving into 3 creepy true springtime horror stories, true horror stories that happened when nature was waking up, and so was something else. These are true scary horror stories shared by real people, packed with ghostly whispers, paranormal encounters, and moments of pure dread. If you love haunted tales, creepy stories, sleep paralysis accounts, and paranormal grip-type terror, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Because what you're about to hear might just change the way you look at spring forever. Let's begin. This story is about the cabin in the clearing. It was mid-April when Daniel and 3 of his college friends took a weekend trip to a remote forest in Oregon. They had found a listing for a rustic log cabin, built decades ago by retired loggers and abandoned sometime in the early 2000s. It was listed as off-grid, which sounded like the perfect escape from their fast-paced lives. The road to the cabin was narrow, flanked by tall pine trees that hadn't seen sunlight in years. As they pulled up, the forest was unusually silent. No birdsong, no insects. Just wind moving slowly through the trees, whispering like breath through teeth. Daniel noticed odd symbols carved into the wooden beams above the doorway. Primitive, scratched in with something sharp. When he mentioned them, one of his friends, Kelsey, shrugged it off as superstitious folklore. But the air felt too heavy to ignore. That night, they sat around a fire inside, drinking and laughing, until Kelsey decided to explore the shed behind the cabin. She came back pale and quiet, refusing to talk about what she saw. She wouldn't sleep. She kept saying she felt like something was standing outside the cabin, watching. At around 3:22 a.m., Daniel woke up with a sharp gasp, chest frozen in place. He couldn't move, sleep paralysis had him pinned to the old mattress. Across the room, he saw it. A figure, impossibly tall, crouched in the corner, its head tilted unnaturally as it stared straight at him. It didn't blink. It didn't breathe. All he could hear was a deep whisper, not a voice, but something inside his own head. The figure reached out with one long, skeletal arm. Daniel finally broke free from the paralysis and screamed, waking the others. The next morning, they discovered the shed had collapsed overnight. Under the wreckage, they found bones, not animal. Human. They left immediately. Weeks later, Daniel researched the area and discovered the cabin was built near a former logging camp, shut down after multiple workers disappeared in the spring of 1953. Locals believed a curse had fallen on the site, a ghostly presence, awakened by melting snow, that claimed anyone who stayed too long. To this day, Daniel still has nightmares of that shadowy figure, crouched in the corner, whispering in a voice that didn't belong in this world. What haunts Daniel the most isn't just the image of that paranormal entity, but what happened after. In the days following their trip, Kelsey became withdrawn, complaining of voices and cold spots in her apartment. She began to suffer from vivid night terrors and repeated episodes of sleep paralysis, during which she described seeing the same figure, tall, crooked, whispering her name. Eventually, she moved out and cut off contact. Daniel himself began noticing strange changes in his home, his mirrors fogging for no reason, damp footprints on wooden floors, and a consistent, low hum that only he could hear. One night, he found a message carved into the wall near his bed, "You brought it back." There were no signs of forced entry. No explanation. Locals who've lived near the forest tell stories of a paranormal grip that lingers around the cabin, ghostly hands that pull you in and don't let go. Some say the land is cursed by an ancient entity born of grief, isolation, and something older than time. Others whisper about chilling tales passed down through generations, of whispers in the dark, faces in the trees, and true ghost stories that begin when the snow melts and end when someone disappears. Daniel no longer travels in the spring. He avoids forests. He avoids silence. Because every now and then, in the quiet of early morning, just as the sun begins to rise, he hears that same whisper again. "You're still mine." This story is about the Bloomfield Trail incident. Jess had always been an avid hiker. She especially loved the early spring, when wildflowers painted the mountain trails with color and the last patches of snow shimmered in the sunlight. She had hiked the Bloomfield Trail before, but never alone. One Saturday morning in early May, Jess set out early, determined to catch sunrise at the overlook. The hike was quiet, eerily so. No fellow hikers. No animals. Just the sound of her boots crunching the damp earth. When she reached a bend in the trail, she noticed something odd, a small, handmade bouquet of dead flowers left on a tree stump. Attached to it was a note. It read, "Return what was taken." Jess laughed it off, maybe a scavenger hunt or someone's strange idea of a joke. But as she kept walking, she began to feel watched. The temperature dropped sharply, despite the sunlight. Shadows on the trail seemed to shift, following her. She even turned her phone camera on to record, just in case. That's when she heard it. A soft humming. Childlike. Sad. Coming from just behind her. She turned, no one was there. By the time she reached the overlook, her nerves were frayed. That's when she spotted it, a woman standing barefoot in the trees behind the clearing. Dressed in white. Motionless. Her face was pale and half covered in dirt. Jess shouted to ask if she needed help, but the woman didn't respond. Instead, she raised one hand and pointed directly at Jess's backpack. That's when Jess remembered, the week before, she had picked a strange-looking flower near the start of the trail. She thought it was unique and pressed it in her journal. As soon as she took it out of her bag and laid it on the ground, the woman disappeared. No sound. No movement. Just, gone. Jess ran the entire way back down the mountain. When she checked the footage from her phone, the humming was there. The woman was not. She later learned that Bloomfield Trail was built on land once used for pagan ceremonies, rituals tied to the changing seasons. The locals believed springtime was a sacred threshold, a time when the veil thinned, allowing paranormal entities to walk among the living. It was a place steeped in haunted stories and chilling tales passed down for generations. In the weeks that followed, Jess experienced paranormal activity she couldn't explain. Her pressed journal flower went missing, replaced by a wilted version tied with red string, just like the one from the trail. She began to hear ghostly whispers at night, low and unintelligible, as if someone was speaking just beneath the sound of her thoughts. One evening, she woke in a state of sleep paralysis, unable to move, as the humming filled the room and her bedroom window slowly creaked open, on its own. She tried to ignore it. To move on. But the paranormal grip the experience left behind refused to let her go. She started seeing the woman again, not in the forest, but in her dreams. Always pointing. Always watching. A neighbor even spotted Jess walking outside in the middle of the night, barefoot and unresponsive, her eyes wide open but vacant. She had no memory of it. That's when she knew, something had followed her home. Locals say you must always respect the forest in spring. Because what awakens with the wildflowers isn't always nature. Sometimes, it's a spirit wronged, tied to the land by a dark secret, waiting for the next curious soul to make the same mistake. Jess never hiked alone again. She never touched another flower along the trail. And each spring, without fail, she leaves a new bouquet on the stump. She doesn't remember when the ritual became hers. Only that it's the only thing keeping her safe. For now. This story is about the Spring House. Ethan was 18 when he landed a part-time job helping restore historical buildings in a quiet countryside town. In April, he was assigned to an old estate just outside the village, a once grand mansion with its own stone spring house, tucked deep in the woods. His supervisor warned him, "Don't mess with the spring house. Just leave it be." Naturally, Ethan was curious. The spring house was small, moss-covered, and half sunk into the hill. Inside, the temperature was freezing, the air damp and heavy. A small stone well sat in the center, filled with pitch-black water. Ethan felt drawn to it. Over the next few days, he found himself returning to the spring house. He began hearing things, voices, just below the threshold of understanding. Whispers, echoing through the cold stone walls. One voice in particular, a woman's, began to speak his name. He started experiencing vivid dreams. In them, he would stand in the spring house, unable to move, as water rose slowly around him. He'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, heart racing. It felt more like a memory than a dream. One morning, he opened the spring house and found the well full of bright red water. No one else saw it. His supervisor claimed it was just his mind playing tricks. That night, Ethan experienced sleep paralysis. He awoke to see a ghostly hand reaching out from the base of his bed, slick with water, dripping onto the floor. Behind it, a woman with hollow eyes stood, her mouth opening in a silent scream. He didn't sleep again for days. Ethan eventually confided in a local historian who told him the land once belonged to a family whose daughter drowned in that very spring house. Some claimed it wasn't an accident. She had been offered as a sacrifice in a fertility ritual, a dark secret buried under generations of soil and silence. The red water, the voices, the dreams, it all pointed to something ancient and angry. The haunting escalated quickly. Ethan started seeing wet footprints on the wooden floors of the estate, even when no one had entered the house. The scent of freshly disturbed earth and mildew would seep into his room at night. Once, he found the word "below" scratched into the condensation on his bathroom mirror. That same night, the springhouse door, long since chained shut, was found wide open at sunrise, the interior bone dry. He began to suffer frequent night terrors, waking up with water on his sheets and the sound of gurgling in his ears. His co-workers started noticing strange behavior. He would mutter to himself, zone out while staring at puddles, and sometimes whisper, "She's still there," under his breath. The other workers refused to go near the springhouse. One of them claimed to have seen a ghostly figure submerged in the well, just beneath the surface, its mouth moving, chanting words no one could understand. Ethan's final day on the job came without warning. He was found collapsed near the well, unconscious, soaking wet despite a dry morning. When he came to, he said the woman had called him back, and that she wanted to trade places. His eyes were bloodshot, and his voice, dry and cracked, spoke of ghostly whispers from the bottom of the spring, of something old, buried in the water that wants to be reborn. Ethan moved away after that. But he still avoids rain, refuses to go near wells, and flinches whenever he hears the sound of trickling water. Some say he's still marked, still touched by the paranormal grip of that cursed place. And when he walks past puddles after storms, he sometimes pauses. Because every so often, he swears he can see her face, smiling just beneath the surface. These true scary horror stories remind us that spring may bring warmth and light, but it also awakens what lies beneath. From ancient forests to forgotten wells, and haunted trails that whisper your name, the season of rebirth can just as easily be the season of terror. If these chilling tales gave you goosebumps, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with someone who loves a good scare. We've got more true horror, ghost stories, and terrifying tales on the way, so don't forget to hit that bell icon. Until next time, beware the whisper on the wind, the shadow in the trees, and the secrets hiding beneath the spring thaw. Because not everything that blooms, should.